Hello all, and welcome back to a new episode of Movies and Us, a weekly gathering place filled with conversations about movies, stories, and connection. My name is Jennifer Hahn.
And I'm Sarah Callan.
And today we're going to be reviewing the latest Robert Eggers film, Nosferatu, and we are joined by a very special guest. Britt is back, y'all. Britt, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hello, my name is Britt. You may have previously heard me on the episode of The Fall Guys with this wonderful podcast. I host a podcast called 1001 by 1, and I'm so excited to be back here. This is so exciting. I cannot wait to talk about this movie with you too.
We're going to have such an interesting conversation and likely a very different conversation than we did on The Fall Guy. I mean, that was so fun, and if we can make that episode discussion such a thrill, we can do any movie after that, you know?
I agree.
All right, well, let's dive right in. Sarah, kick us off with an IMDb summary for Nosferatu.
A gothic tale of obsession between a haunted young woman and the terrifying vampire infatuated with her, causing untold horror in its wake.
All right. And in Movies and Us tradition, we are going to start off with our one-sentence summary. Britt, as our guest, would you like to share yours first?
Absolutely. My one-sentence summary of Nosferatu is, vampires don't have to be sexy while destroying their world.
Love it. Love it. Yeah. A new addition, a new entry into the vampire genre. And it makes some choices. It makes some choices.
Bold choices, I will say.
Yeah. Sarah, what is your one-sentence summary for Nosferatu?
Mine is, in a world of blood-sucking vampires and men, be a Willem Dafoe.
I mean, in general in life, but especially in this world, yes, let's be Willem Dafoe. He is so charming. We will have a whole discussion about him.
I'm a stan. Yeah. I'm a Willem Dafoe stan forever and always. So I agree.
My one-sentence summary is, beware of love triangles.
Legit.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
All right.
100%. Especially when one is Orlok.
You know?
Hello.
Yep. Would not want to be a Hutter in this situation. All right. Well, or Ellen, really. I mean, either of the two. Yeah.
Oh, tragic figure.
Okay, let's dive right in with our spoiler-free high-level review of Nosferatu and maybe some back context from each of us on, one, are we an Eggers fan? Are we in it for his work? How do we feel about some of his other pieces? And then Nosferatu vampire films, like where are we on that whole world? So, Britt, start us off.
So no one else can see this, but behind me, I have Black Phillip from The Witch, and it says, would you like to live deliciously? And I also own the script of The Witch. I am a pretty big Eggers fan, not going to lie. I didn't like The Northman, I'm going to be honest, but I love The Witch. I love The Lighthouse. And I mean, Eggers movies basically always work for me. I also am a basic bitch, and I love vampires so much. I am like one of the biggest vampire fans. I read Dracula when I was probably in the 4th or 5th grade, and it changed my life. I have a small version of it, and yes, it is a very problematic book, but I still really love it. I have a little version of it next to my bed at night. Like, I am a vampire girl. I love vampire lore, and I love occultism. So you guys didn't even know that you were asking the right person to come on this podcast, because these are all things that I really love, which really basically means like this movie was made for me. And I know that. Like, I went into this being like, I am going to be so biased, and I can't help that. But it's my life, and I'm fine with that.
I love that. Man, we knew you were the right person, but we did not know the extent of what that rightness was until this very moment.
Yeah.
It's sitting, that piece of, you're using it as wall art, you got your security blanket, comfort. Some people have stuffed animals.
I do.
You got your Dracula.
My comfort Dracula.
Yeah.
Next to my bed.
Love it. Well, it could have been interesting. I'm very curious your thoughts about this movie, though. It'll be good. Okay. Yeah. Sarah, what about you?
Yeah, I am a Robert Eggers fan as well. I love The Lighthouse. I still haven't seen The Witch. That's the only one that I haven't seen. I need to. It's on the to-watch list. But yeah, The Lighthouse is so good. And that was what originally was like, yes, I am a fan. So, yeah, I was excited for this movie. Just a couple weeks ago, we reviewed the 1922 Nosferatu. That was the first time I had seen it. And so I felt ready, did my homework, and was ready to go into this new Nosferatu experience.
All right. Well, I'm also a Robert Eggers fan. I have not seen The Witch as well. So I think we just, in order to continue to stay friends with Britt, we need to do our homework and watch apparently one of her most beloved movies. This will be...
It is a top tier, one of my favorite films.
Love it. The Lighthouse, I find, is a really interesting gauge for when you're meeting a new person and you're like, you love movies too. How do you feel about The Lighthouse? Where you fall? And if they love it, you're like, we can hang. We're the same type of person. Love it.
We have an episode of The Lighthouse on 1001, and Adam does not like it at all. He hates The Lighthouse, and Joey and I really love it. So it's a fun discussion because he's just like, this is not made for me at all.
Yep.
It's great. It just shows how varied our experiences are and what we enjoy.
Honestly.
Great.
You gotta fight.
The Lighthouse, I'm obsessed with The Lighthouse. I think it's so good. It's cosmic horror. Of course I love it. Come on.
We similarly have a friend that's been on the pod a couple of times, and he loves to make fun of The Lighthouse, and so he gets his whole bit. He does somehow every episode.
Also valid.
Why are we weaving in the octopus yet again,
Because why not? They're so cool.
I was also a big fan of The Northman as well. So I'm, 2 for 2. We'll see with The Witch. It's on the list. But as far as vampire movies, did our homework a couple weeks ago with Sarah and reviewed Nosferatu 1922, what I think is really interesting to have so fresh in the back of my mind going into this movie. Probably definitely shaped my viewing experience of this movie, having that so fresh. Yeah, and then the whole, I grew up in the era where vampire movies and the way that it invaded into the teen pop culture realm was prime time. So I never got sucked into that world. So that's why I'm fascinated to see.
I did, man.
You did.
I read all of the Twilight books. I read all a bunch of the True Blood books.
Yeah.
I'm actually currently reading a smutty vampire book right now. So I'm not even kidding. So I am fully in that world. But I also love a portrayal of a vampire where they aren't sexy, because if you go back to the actual lore of vampires, they are terrifying and they're horrendous. So can we please have more horrendous vampires? That's all I want.
Yep. And we'll get into the discussion about where this movie lands on that spectrum. I think that'll be fascinating. Okay, well, should we dive into our thoughts about Robert Eggers' edition of Nosferatu? And in this section, we won't spoil this movie quite yet. We're going to get there real soon. But kind of high-level thoughts about Nosferatu. Did it work for you? Did it land? Britt, what are your thoughts? On the edge of my seat.
I'll go first. I'm fine with this. So I also came to Nosferatu, the 1922 version, very recently. I just hadn't watched it because that era of movie is just not my favorite. It's hard for me to connect with, and I usually find them extremely taxing to get through. I loved Nosferatu. I thought it was really fascinating. I thought it was a fantastic addition into horror history. I'm not sure I need to go back to it, but I was so thrilled that I had the chance to watch it during 31 Days of Halloween, where we just did a week of vampire movies, which was my favorite week. It was so much fun. So I went to go see this last night, and with my sister, who is not a horror person. She just wanted to go for the costumes, which I was like, fair, they're beautiful. And I knew this was a divisive film. I knew there were a bunch of people that did not like it. And I was like, that's okay. I was like, I might not like this film, and that's all right. I was so pleasantly surprised that I really enjoyed myself while I was watching this. Didn't expect to, but then also as I was watching it, my sister turned to me and went, "This is kind of tailor-made for you." And I was like, it is. Yeah, I'm just basic, and it made me happy. Were there issues within it? Absolutely. I think there were pacing issues. I think that some of the performances were a little bizarre. I'm looking at you, Aaron Taylor Johnson. What was going on there? But the things that I enjoyed about the film outweighed the things that annoyed me about the film. So ultimately, on this first viewing, I had a really good time. I was shocked by a couple of the things that happened in it, to the point where I was open mouth staring at the screen. I was so reactive during this experience, and it was great for me. I loved it. So
All right. She ate it up, y'all. It was a win. It was a home run for Britt. Sarah, what about you?
I'm basic.
Yeah. What are your thoughts about Nosferatu?
Yeah, I also had a good time watching this. I think just visually this film is gorgeous. And so it hooked me in. I was along for the ride. The vibe got me. I think that there are some problematic aspects to it, but I had a good time. Robert Eggers, it worked for me. So I had fun in the theater, and yeah, happy to actually see this in the theater rather than just waiting to watch it at home. I think that this was a really good experience just to showcase all the visuals and then also to just be immersed in this world in that way. So yeah, good theater viewing experience.
All right. So it landed for you as well. I'm probably the least warm to this film out of the three of us, but there's so many interesting choices that are made in this movie that I've been like mulling on since watching it. So I would say that I'm mixed. There's things that I loved about this movie. The visuals are stunning. I think there's a lot of like pacing issues, especially in the middle section. I think it's just, it's a slog right in the middle. But then by the time we get to the ending, there's a lot of really great choices that are made to like really continue to build the momentum that I think helps us land at this ending. And that ending I found really interesting, especially that ending scene, which I'm sure we'll talk about, of some choices that were made that kind of defied some of my expectations and plays within way more of the gray area of, on one side of the spectrum, like vampires or terrifying, horrifying, gross, to like they're desirable and sexy and whatnot. And this like movie lands in this like fairy tale-esque realm, which I think is really fascinating. And there's kind of a mixed feeling in the ending of, but we'll get to. I won't spoil too much quite yet. But I thought some of those choices were really fascinating, and I don't know how I feel about them yet. They didn't like, I'm not like, oh yes, this was an amazing ending, but I'm like, that was a choice, and that's given me so much to think about. The visuals are stunning, though. I think there's some shots that like are seared into my brain, which I think is really, really fun. There's a lot of moments that I kept thinking about the 1922 version throughout this film too, which we will talk about. Some things that I think were a little bit overused in this version that were used more effectively in the 1922 version. So some of that comparison points made me feel a little bit more mixed about this one. So yeah, overall, I think we've got a good spread here. Shall we dive right in?
I agree.
Spoiler alert. Okay, well, if you haven't seen Nosferatu 2024, Robert Eggers' version, we recommend checking it out in theaters, going out to see this movie before listening to the rest of our conversation. This is definitely, like Sarah mentioned, a movie very much worth watching in theaters. The sound design, so pleasantly surprised sound design. We'll have to talk about that at some point. So, it's your spoiler alert. All right, where should we dive in?
I mean, the atmosphere of this movie is pitch perfect, in my opinion. I was fully in. I'm a huge folk horror fan. I love mythology. I love folklore, and this felt like watching folklore just like come alive on the screen in front of me, which made me giddy. Like I was so excited watching this movie. It could have been the fact that I had a beer right before I went in, and I was like loopy from days of performing, but like I was so into this film from basically the first shot. I just like gave myself over to Orlok and was like, yes, please take me on this journey, you disgusting daddy. I'm here for this. Please take me through life now. That's how I felt watching this movie. It like just, oh my God, I was so thrilled for all 2 hours and 12 minutes. That shouldn't have been 2 hours and 12 minutes. We could have shaved off about 20 minutes in there, I think, at least, especially when it comes to Ellen's fits. There were too many of them before we got Willem Dafoe in. Like just too many. We don't need to see that 5 times before we actually get some type of person who's going to listen to her. But even so, I still was there on that journey.
We do get a lot of those fits, and we get a lot of conversations between Ellen and Harding, I think, which also just didn't really add much to the plot. So I think a lot of those scenes didn't really work and just felt like we're stalling, like we're just stalling for runtime. gorgeous sets, gorgeous homes, gorgeous settings. They're like overlooking the mountains and over the sea and all this stuff. Like it's all stunning, but it doesn't push the plot forward. And I think I would have loved more Willem Dafoe earlier on. And especially this kind of tension between like the study of like medical observation and science being in contention with spiritualism.
Yes.
I like wanted the film to like double click a little bit more into that because it's very much in the 1922 version. All of the ingredients are here in this one, and kind of Willem Dafoe acknowledging and holding space for both, but sometimes not being listened to or being rejected for that, I think would have been so interesting. And then him ultimately being right, because Willem Dafoe is always right, would have been so fun to see a little bit more of that push and pull. So throw him in earlier, give him a little bit more of that like rejection from the community of like, look at this guy that believes in this stuff, like this is where we believe in science. And it would have been interesting, especially in our 2024 modern, very like science observation, truth grounded context. And to have that contention and tension in place would have been really fun.
I agree. I think that was a bit of a missed opportunity. I think there was a little too much exposition towards the end that we could have had more in the beginning. I'm specifically thinking of the carriage scene where he's like, these are the things we have to do in order to kill this vampire, kill the Nosferatu. I don't think they actually call him a vampire at all, because honestly, I'm not really sure that Orlok is a vampire, but we can get into that in a little bit. But there was so much exposition in like that one carriage scene that I thought, this could have been laid earlier. This feels a little too rushed at this moment. Do I accept it? Yes, because this movie fucking rocks, in my opinion. But that doesn't mean there aren't issues. And that issue for me like really did stand out. And also when our obvious favorite character, Harding, turns to like Nicholas Holt's character, Harding was like, I'm so sorry, I didn't believe you. I turned to my sister and I went, of course he believes the man. Screw him. Like, we're not going to believe women. Of course not. Nobody believes women. But as soon as he's like shows his chest to him at his family's funeral, he's like, my God, man, I'm so sorry. Dude, I was the worst. And it's like, yeah, you are. You're the worst in this whole movie. So maybe I just really anything with Harding. I was like, let's cut him. Let's cut him out. We don't need him.
That's how I felt too. And like, I don't know. Aaron Taylor Johnson, I'm sure that he's good in some things, but he is the weak link in this movie by a long shot. And so while I was watching, I kept waiting for Willem Dafoe. I was like, where is he? I know he's in this movie. I'm ready. This is a Willem Dafoe movie. Where is he? He's not here yet.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, okay, if we could have just cut down on Aaron Taylor Johnson, because not great, and then just increase the Willem Dafoe time, I feel like this really could have been just spot on.
I agree. Totally agree.
All I need is Willem Dafoe like mumbling his little office for like 5 minutes straight, and I'm a happy camper, just like watch him like pound around in his little lair. That looked incredible.
I wanted so many more shots in there of that cramped, tiny space of his like alchemist life. I wanted to know what he was trying to create. I wanted to know what books he had. I wanted to know what esoteric works he was like looking through. I needed all of those like answers, and I didn't get any of them. And I was so annoyed. I was like, can we just get a walkthrough of that set so I can see what relics you have on your shelf to see if I know what they are? Like, that's what I wanted so badly.
The door swings open. Willem Dafoe, hello, welcome to my crib. A little house tour, shall we?
Please. But I don't think he would say hello, welcome. He'd say, go away. And then we'd go in anyways. And it would just be him like over our shoulders telling us not to touch things.
But don't touch it, please.
Don't touch it. No, don't touch it.
Those are like a hippopotamus's tongue that I need for like.
Yeah. A whale penis, right? Yeah. Like they use that in a lot of stuff.
Okay. Well, you brought up an interesting point just now, Britt, around is Orlok a vampire or not? Because I found the visual design of Orlok to be incredibly fascinating. The stash, incredible.
I love the stash. The stash is perfect.
There'd be some shots of the camera from the side where you see the incredible nose, of course, classic. And then just this like tuft of hair beneath it. It's like, what a choice. He looks far more human-like than so many of, especially the 1922 version of Orlok, which is a lot more like bug-eyed and more creature human-like and creature-esque. And Orlok,
Very animalistic.
very much monstrous. And I would say this Orlok kind of leans far more human man, very tall, giant human man with a deep voice. And
Yeah.
that choice was really fascinating because of all of the ways that this team could have designed visually for Orlok to look. He's a lot more leaning towards the human traits than creaturely. And I'm curious your thoughts on that choice and how that fits into maybe even like the larger context and story of like his relationship with Ellen and kind of this. Yeah, tell me more about that.
I think it's fascinating. I thought it was a really, really great choice, especially because Eggers was specifically trying to use the lore of like Romania and what Romanian lords would look like at the time that Orlok became this creature, this vampire. So especially with like the design with his fur coat, which was just amazing, with the stash in particular, just with the way he carried himself, with even the dead language that he used to speak to Ellen. It's all based in like this very old lore and history of where it's from, which I think was a really brilliant choice, in my opinion, because it differentiated Orlok from everybody around him. He's stuck in time. He's frozen in one place. He has no opportunity to change and grow. And when he does change, he's decaying. Like he can't become new and revitalized, which I think is such a cool aspect of this movie, because I feel like a lot of the times, especially in like Dracula, if you go back to 1992's Bram Stoker's Dracula, which I don't think we should really compare too much because they are very, very different stories. Like Dracula and Nosferatu are similar but different. But he becomes more beautiful, right? He becomes this sexual, enticing creature. And Orlok's not enticing. Orlok's not sexy. Orlok is a predator, and they allowed him to be a predator. And I thought that was a really strong choice in this. His voice, I don't know how he did that. It does not sound real. It is wild. And it was in my dreams last night. Like, holy crap.
Yeah. It's definitely haunting. And I love that he, in some ways, has the form of a human, and yet there is still this creature-ness to him. One of the things that I kept thinking about was his breathing. And number one, I love that they didn't make him sound like Darth Vader.
Yeah.
Like, that's impressive in and of itself. But to have that kind of growling as he's breathing, I think, and you hear that all throughout the film, I think really helps to emphasize that he is not a human. He might look like one, kind of, and like move like one sometimes, but there is something else going on here. There is something animal going on here. And to do that through his breathing, I thought was a really, really smart choice.
It also made me think that like his insides look like his outsides. So his lungs do not work anymore. Like he still is breathing, but he's obviously decaying from the inside out. And that is such a terrifying thought that like maybe one day he'll just be this like decrepit like body that's like every piece of him has just decayed from him, but he still is conscious somehow. Like what a terrifying thought. I love it. It disturbs me just even saying it out loud. I like disturbing things though, so thanks Eggers. I appreciate it.
Yes. Oh, I love it. Well, I think what's also really like interesting about him visually looking more human is that it frames the relationship with Ellen so differently. I think I expected a more terrifying, like Eggers to lean into the horror of this. And like I mentioned earlier, this feels more like a twisted fairy tale in a lot of ways. I was thinking a lot about The Shape of Water and the way that the amphibian man is designed in that as well. It's human-like and yet also creaturely, but it's still very grounded in the human traits. And similarly here, it's easier for us to buy into this like weird, twisted relationship of obsession and loneliness that's fulfilled by companionship and love between these two, because he's not designed to look like a monster, but he's a human man that is also experiencing loneliness and isolation and seeking companionship. And that's from the beginning the way that Ellen's first relationship with him is like grounded and rooted is that desire for affection. And it's twisted, of course, but that framing from the beginning I thought was just fascinating for the way that this is like bookended on the beginning and the way that the film chooses to end it too.
So I have a question. Is it affection or is it coveting things that he can't have? Because I personally didn't see affection within him. What I saw was a very cruel person who took a young, impressionable woman and basically ruined her life when she became of age. She was a child, but this is like neither here nor there, but there's a lot of like women who became like psychics and stuff whose abilities came to be, quote unquote, I don't believe in psychics, but I'm just saying, like, came to be in it when they hit puberty. And so like the kind of idea I got from Ellen was she was having these visions, but it probably came to be a little bit more when she did start having her period, when she did start having these desires that people don't talk about because women weren't allowed to have any desire other than to be a mother at that time or to dedicate their lives to God. And so that's what he clung on to because she was open and she was available and he could manipulate her in a way that was beneficial for him. You know, he found kinship in that. And then he became just, like a really petty little shit who wanted to draw up some contracts to own somebody. Sorry, hit my microphone.
Which, honestly, one of my favorite things that we see in movies is villains who understand contract law. I really appreciate that. You signed a contract, you didn't read the fine print. Lawyered, like he got you. But yeah, I definitely read Orlok the same way that you did, Britt. I didn't see any. I don't see anything positive with Orlok at all. He is evil. He is manipulative. He is awful.
He's nasty.
And so I saw that like right from the beginning. The idea of affection never entered my mind in the 2-hour movie experience because I don't think anybody has any affection for anybody else in this film.
Nope.
I do think that Ellen and Thomas really care about each other. I was a pretty big fan of Nicholas Hoult in this. I love him. I thought he was amazing in The Great. I'm a big fan. And I think that Thomas Hutter is a very difficult character. Like, he could just be a wet blanket. He could just be so pathetic. And I think he's trying. Like, and I think that comes down to the Nicholas Hoult being charismatic because he kind of sucks. Like, he does nothing. He's so ineffectual, but he does care about Ellen, and maybe he goes about things in the wrong way, but there's affection there. Maybe. I don't know. There's still some weird shit that happens that I'm like, okay, I don't think we need to be, I don't think that should have happened, but it's the movie.
He does what he needs to do. He plays his role with the earnestness of trying hard and failing.
Failing.
Like, I buy
so
that you're really trying earnestly the best that you can. It's just, you're up against Orlok, you know what I mean? Like, he's gonna lose that battle.
That first power play between them when he comes to the castle after his horse has been stolen and he's just like hiking up the hill and he floats into a carriage, which is honestly my favorite shot of the whole thing. I was like, can I float too? Please bring me into the carriage. I love this so much. But that whole scene where he's just terrified, he knows something is wrong with Orlok, and Orlok's like, no, call me Lord. Call me by my blood, like call me by this position, which also I think harkens back to such an old time for him. It's like that's the first disparity where you're like, oh, he's not of the same time. But when he's like, drink this, and you're like, no, don't drink it. What are you doing? And he does anyways. Oh, God. I love that. That I was on the edge of my seat. I was like leaned forward, smiling. It was ridiculous. I was probably very entertaining to watch in that movie because I was so reactive.
I need to watch you watch this movie.
Yes. At one point, my sister turned to me and she just did a thumbs up. She was like, so that I knew she was enjoying it. It was amazing.
One of my favorite parts of this film, visually and audibly, is Hutter's arrival to the castle for the first time. I think that whole sequence is probably the strongest in the entire film. The way that the film indulges and lingers in those moments and lets it breathe. You know, like the doors slowly opening and we hear the rumbling of them like turning open and we see the silhouette of Orlok, and then the doors closing so slowly as Orlok turns and like beckons you to follow him. I think that whole sequence is so strong. And then the way that we also don't see Orlok's face for most of that power play sequence, just his hands and his voice and his presence. I thought that was just filmed so beautifully, and all of the filmmaking aspects are coming together. So I think that was one of the strongest sequences in the entire film. One of my favorites.
I think they were missing those strong sequences towards the end of the film. It kind of lost that mysticism that it had, that like where it harkened back to the moments of the lighthouse where you're like, is this reality? Is this not? Is this in his head? What is going on? I think we kind of lost that a little bit at the end. And I would have liked a few more moments that were that stylized instead of just kind of racing towards the end, because that's how it felt a little bit. Again, loved the film, but I would have preferred just a little bit more of that, a little more of that like surreal, uncanny moments that we got, especially leading into the castle.
Yeah, because it's so tense going up into the castle, and like by the end, I mean, obviously there's tension at the end, and you're worried about Ellen and what's going to happen and yada yada blah blah blah, but I don't know, man, that moment when Hutter is on his journey is, I think, one of the most tense parts of the film. And I mean, like you said, Britt, Nicholas Hoult does an incredible job in that scene when he first meets Orlok. And you can see, you know, he starts feeling like something is a little bit off, but like he's here to do a job, so he's going to do the job and kind of power through it. But by the end, pure terror in his eyes. And so being able to go on that journey with that character and starting in a relatively normal place, you know, we've all been uncomfortable in interactions before, but then ending in a place where you are beyond terrified. Going on that journey with that character was so effective. And I don't know that we have those types of moments later on where I'm feeling that level of terror that I felt early on.
Yes. I totally agree. And I think some of that comes down to, I don't think there were quite enough moments with Orlok in this movie. I think that he was underutilized. And I understand why they want to keep him in the shadows. I understand why you don't want to show your monster too much. But when you have a performer like Bill Skarsgård, who is performing the hell out of this role, making it his own, when Shrek did such an incredible job as Nosferatu, the iconic Nosferatu, like taking on this role had to have been an immense amount of pressure. When you have a performer that is so strong, why not utilize him more? Why not take out Harding and just put in another moment between Hutter and Orlok, or even crazy, maybe have one between Willem Dafoe and Orlok. Like, what would that look like if the shadow is coming to this mystic, right? This person who is a part of this magician, honestly. That would just be fascinating. Why not give us more of that? Because God, he was good. Every time he was on screen, I was like, yes, give me more. I love this not vampire.
I agree. One of the sequences that I think they differentiated, I think, from the 1922 version, but I kept thinking about the 1922 version was the scene on the ship. Like, that is one of the best sequences in 1922. And when we cut to the ship, I'm like, all right, here we go. Like, we're going to do the thing. And, you know, that like shot of him like rising from behind in the 1922 version and like appearing out of like the mist. And I just feel like we get a bunch of people that die, which is really good, effective, but missed opportunity. I think we could have gotten some really great Orlok moments that are outside of his context too, so we can see the way that he moves within the set of a ship, which would have been really fun, and the sea and the ocean, and do the thunder rolling. You know, I think that whole sequence would have been really epic. So I think that could have been a missed opportunity to see some really fun Orlok stalking its prey moments.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I was shocked at how little time we spend on the ship. Because I don't know, man, like you said, Jen, I feel like it's just a perfect recipe for some good horror-y moments, and to really, because we know that Orlok is evil. We know that he is, you know, feeding on people, obsessed with Ellen, so bad things are going to happen to her. But seeing him in a different environment to unleash his horror on some unsuspecting people, I think could have really heightened the tension going into that final, I don't know, moment with Ellen.
I really would love to read the script to see what was cut, because it does feel like, especially in those scenes, like on the ship, it feels so short compared to so many other things. And I just wonder what was cut due to time, what was cut due to budgetary reasons, and what was cut due to bad movies that came out recently. Because there was that movie, that vampire movie, like the Crossing of the Demeter or something like that, that was all about Dracula's journey across the sea. And it's a terrible movie. And I just can't help but think they were like, ooh, let's not do too many vampires on the water, because that did not go over well. Like what were the choices behind not doing that? And I understand not wanting to like take too much from the original, because it should be its own thing. And you can take I love that he wanted to make this his own, but there are certain iconic things that would have just been really helpful in establishing Orlok as this menace. I mean, that's what he is. He's destroying so many things.
The other aspect kind of related to that is that I think they could have played up in volume more is the plague that's descending upon the town. Because 1922 version, again, it's so clear that he is this this force of death that is kind of clouding and overtaking the city. And I think we get a feeling of that in this movie, but having more of that they could lean into a little bit more of like his presence, like just the iciness of his presence here is ushering in literally the kiss of death on like masses of people. I think would have been like play up the drama of that, like people are dying because this man is just breathing in their presence. I think that would have been really fun too. We just get some, cuts of rats, and then we're like the plague, and then we kind of continue on with our primary like isolated storyline. But the plague is a point in the movie where the stakes have now increased, and the scale of Orlok's reign has now increased. And so I think I would have wanted to like feel that a little bit more. I think I knew that cognitively, but to feel it and see it.
Well, and a lot of these creatures in mythology were created as a way for people to understand things that were happening to them, right? So a vampire coming through a town and there's a plague, that's to show like, we're trying to find a reason for this, right? We're trying to find a reason for why this happened. So I think it is totally a missed opportunity to kind of harp on that as well, to kind of showcase this folklore that exists in our history. Like that is something that people would do. And I really like I don't like a plague, but it's fascinating. Like it's a really interesting part of the original. It's an interesting part. I don't know if either of you watched the Werner Herzog remake from like 1979. I want to say. Let me check real quick because I have it up. 1979. Yeah. It's with Klaus Kinski, that's a whole other discussion, that man. But it's very much they focus a lot on that Orlok wants to die and that he is the plague. Like the reason everything he touches dies. And while I don't particularly like that film because I don't like the way that they portray Orlok in it at all, that's a really cool aspect of it that I wish they had brought into this. It's important in my opinion. But I think some of it was just too hurried. I think that there's a lot that's been cut out. I want to know what was cut.
We did like 5 hours.
Give me the answers, Eggers.
Extended cut edition.
And sounds great.
Come on.
Give it to me. 4.5 hours, perfect. I'll sit in the theater, no problem.
Oh, it's so good. Okay, we have to talk about the ending scene. The way that's shot, the way that unfolds, where it chooses to end. Tell me your thoughts about the way this ends. Because that's, I think, one of the things I was thinking about throughout this film as we're going along on this journey is the way that this movie chooses to have that ending scene shot and shown. I think is going to be really definitive for like what this movie, kind of the exclamation point it's going to make on its portrayal of vampires and its relationships between Orlok and Ellen and whatnot. I think it makes some interesting choices in that ending scene. Curious your thoughts on the ending.
Well, first off, like how does he not know that I guess her blood is just that potent that he has no idea that dawn's about to happen. Like, a good he sees it happening and she's like, no, keep going, you're fine. And he goes, okay, I guess so, but that's fine, that's okay. I actually really liked the ending of this. I always have an issue with the sacrificial woman. Like, that is a tough one to have, because it's like we have like basically one female character. Well, we have two like femme characters, but one dies horrifically with her children, which that was a moment that I did not expect. Cat survived, which was great, but not the children. And so I really enjoyed the way that they showed it, because I felt like Ellen had a lot of power, and I appreciated that. I appreciated that it did feel like her choice. I don't love that she sacrificed herself, because I just think maybe we could have found a different way to tell that ending. But first off, I didn't feel like the nudity was gratuitous at all. I thought it was totally fine, totally not like it was totally necessary. I was disgusted by Orlok drinking from her. It was one of the most unsexy things I've ever seen. It was extremely disturbing. It felt violating, but also I think that's what they were going for. So I was like, good for you. And I got to be honest, I love watching people bleed from their eyes in movies. So his death was pitch perfect for me. I was in it. I was like, yes, give me more. I wanted his like flesh to start melting. I wanted it to go full body horror. Like, give me the Fly levels of his skin melting off his body, please. But I still was fine with what they did personally. I really enjoyed the ending. I thought that it was a unique take on a vampire. I'm glad that he didn't like poof into dust like in Buffy the Vampire Slayer. That would have really killed it for me. And that again solidified why I don't really think he's a vampire. I think he's probably a demon, like personally, who has vampiric traits, especially since I believe they say that he was created by Belial, who like Belial is a prince of hell, said to be like the second angel to fall after Lucifer. He is dedicated to making humans guilty, especially in lust and sexual perversions. So that whole thing also, I know too much about demons. I'm so sorry. But that whole thing like really made the ending make a lot of sense for me. Because I was like, oh, if he's Belial, if he was created by Belial, this all does come to fruition for me. But still, maybe we don't have to have women die all the time for for men to survive.
Yeah, that would be nice. I
right?
mean, especially since the whole movie is just men, except for Willem Dafoe, not believing this woman and just constantly gaslighting her and tying her up and drugging her and mocking her and like mistreating her generally. And then she's murdered at the end to save them. It's like, oh, gosh, I get it. It is an appropriate ending for the film, but I still hate it so much.
Yeah.
But I do think it's interesting that, and you've mentioned this, Jen, that it's like a dark fairy tale. And I feel like that ending and that ending shot especially highlights that aspect of it.
The kiss. The kiss was the thing where I was like, oh, this is such an interesting interpretation that is being portrayed of this relationship. Because they linger with the silhouettes for so long. And you're just like, he could do anything at this point. Like, you know what I mean? But for it to land in a kiss, I was like, that is such an interesting choice to make on this film. And it's kind of this bleeding and willingness to hold so many like typical stereotypes around vampires all at once together. Like, he's not choosing for this to be a pure horror where like truly it is like predator and prey. There's that, very much that aspect, oh my gosh. But there's something intermixed in there as well. And then even in that ending shot where Orlok looks off into the window and sees the sun rising, there's almost this like knowing that I felt. It's like he knows that this is going to take him out and he's choosing this, and it's this willingness that he has to say like, okay, yes, this is my end, but like this is my willing end as well. And for both of them to then have made that choice, it's framed so differently. I'm glad it wasn't another version where like he's truly like taking advantage of her and she's like because that's the 1922 version, is it's very rapey.
Exactly.
And I'm glad they didn't take that approach. I would have been very upset about that one. But it's a blending of many like flavors and colors of how we've seen vampires portrayed, like almost all at once, which I thought was a difficult choice to make, and somehow it works and it lands. And so that's interesting to me.
I think they really subverted a lot of the tropes we see with normal vampire movies, which I think a lot of people wanted. I think that's one of the reasons why people aren't responding to this movie as much, because we have this preconceived notion of what a vampire should be like in our society. We have these really romantic, beautiful portrayals of vampires, especially like I'm a huge fan of the 1984 Interview with a Vampire. Like, it's freaking great. I'm really enjoying the show Interview with a Vampire, but these are sexy, hypersexual vampires who are all about sensuality and about giving you, like, not to be like over the top, but like giving pleasure while they take what they want, right? It is a sensual experience for everybody. And that's not the case in this. This is about power. This is about control. This is about coveting things you shouldn't have. This is about really awful relationships. I mean, God, the connotations of how she and Orlok found each other are horrifying, but also make sense when you look into the lore of vampires, because vampires didn't necessarily drink blood. There are a lot of stories of vampires strangling people. There are a lot of stories about vampires. This is really bad, but sexually assaulting people and then killing them. Like that is something that is in the lore. And the fact that Eggers brought that into the story, I think, is really important. Because we have a habit of taking things and running with them and forgetting that they come from very scary places. And I think vampires are one of those things that we have forgotten come from a very scary origin. Like, vampires can be scary again. Let's make vampires scary, please. Let's allow them to be scary instead of just sexy. Though I love a sexy vampire too. Like, that's fine too.
Yeah, we can have both.
Yes.
You know, there can be two types of vampires here.
Crazy that two things can exist at the same time.
I know it's crazy talk here, but wow. I think we can do it.
I hope so. Revolutionary.
But I think you bring up something and you are way more versed in Robert Eggers than I think we are, but he is known for doing his research and getting into the lore and making sure to infuse those things into his films and not just creating something that's kind of detached from the history. And so that's what we see in Nosferatu as well.
I can't wait for you both to watch The Witch, just so you can appreciate the historical elements in that movie. We're actually doing it next year on the podcast, and I can't wait. I'm so excited, because if I have a favorite, well, it's really hard because, like, creatures, my favorites are vampires and witches, and it's difficult for me to choose between. It kind of depends on the day. Like, today, vampires are my favorite because Nosferatu. But as soon as I start talking about witches, I'm like, but witches are my favorite, right? So do you guys have a favorite, like, mythological creature or, like, monster in a monster movie?
Oh, wow.
That's a good question that I don't think I've ever thought of before. So the monster that comes right off the top of my head, and Jen is going to laugh at me, is Godzilla. Because for some reason, I just have a weird affection for Godzilla. He's just a big guy. He just wants to take a nap and eat a snack in peace. And then people keep shooting at him.
Yeah.
And so I have so much empathy for Godzilla.
You know what? Justice for Godzilla. Honestly.
This is what I'm saying.
Yeah. Justice for Godzilla. I will always side with Godzilla.
I can't watch a Godzilla movie and review it with Sarah ever again, because it's just going to be her like fighting for his rights the entire time.
It's
and I'm
true.
Just here listening.
It's true.
Like, she's advocating for his independence, for his freedom.
Absolutely.
He's just misunderstood big guy.
Okay, so how do you feel about like Godzilla versus Kong?
I think you were Godzilla. Team Godzilla, yeah.
Well, yeah, I'm Team Godzilla. Obviously.
Yeah, obviously.
Come on.
Yeah.
I don't remember if I've watched that movie,
I
though.
would suggest it. Like, to be perfectly honest, at some point I think Kong has like a sword, and I'm like, why does Kong have a sword?
Oh,
this is so confusing. I'm not a fan of those movies, but I like the older ones, and Godzilla Minus Zero is
so good.
Beyond. So
yes.
Yeah.
Godzilla, great choice. I love it.
With their budget too. Like it does not compute in my brain when I see the visuals and then think about the money. I'm like, what? This is some magic. sorcery.
They knew how to spend it.
Yeah, artistry, truly.
Put it in the right place.
Okay, any other last big thoughts about Nosferatu before we wrap? I feel like we could talk about this for hours, but any other big thing?
Yes, I could. I did not think I was going to enjoy Lily Rose Depp. I was really worried. And while I don't think all of her scenes were the best, I actually really liked her. I thought she was a very, very great protagonist. She was easy to love and easy to follow for me. I really liked her in this. I just wanted to give her a little shout out.
Agreed.
For taking on a very difficult role.
She goes for it too, like full
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think she does the right amount of like the playing the like soft, innocent, like the tenderness side of Ellen, and then also the side where she's like advocating for like, why don't you believe me? You know, like I am powerful, I am strong, I know that I am right. And she plays back and forth between that very well. I think I would have been more upset if she was just the like soft, dainty Ellen version, stereotype that we've seen. So I appreciated that.
And I also appreciated the fact that she felt like a strong female character, but still from that time. Like it wasn't a modern version of like a woman from our time back in the 19th century, because that's weird. I'm sorry, but like I don't like it when we have characters that have our sensibilities in these times in these kind of movies, because that we have come to where we are in society because of things that have happened in the past, right? So I thought they did a very good job of creating this character that I feel like could exist in this time. And I was appreciative of that. I thought that was great.
I love that they also included my personal favorite line from the 1922 film, which is when Hutter brings her flowers and she says, "Why have you killed these beautiful flowers?" And I loved that. I was like, yes, girl, you tell him. That cracks me up every time. And that, to me, feels like the appropriate response when somebody brings you flowers. I love it. Yes,
so you'd rather get like a plant that you can nurture.
Yes. Except
great.
I have a black thumb, so that isn't great. So just bring me food.
Fair. Easy.
Is what I want. Yeah.
I have 3 plants in my house. No, 4. No, I have 4 plants. 4 plants that are currently alive. I don't know how. I am terrible with all plants, but somehow they are thriving. Full disclosure, I bought like 15 plants since in the last 4 years, and every single other one has died. One is behind me, and I don't know how it's growing. I don't know why it's growing. I forget it's there all the time. So maybe it just doesn't need love, is what I'm assuming.
Yeah, I'm impressed. Way to go. It's an accomplishment.
I have no plants.
That's okay.
Yeah, I also have no plants.
Also, I find them very stressful, to be perfectly honest. I love them. I love looking at them. They give me like hope and life and light. But then I also think, oh my God, you have to rely on me, plant. Thank God I don't have children, because that would just be like, I would not know what to do with myself.
Fred and I were talking about
I can't handle a plant.
That, like,
I can't handle a kid.
Plants and gardens could speak to us. We wish they could speak English or any language. I will translate, but just what do you need? Because you are dry.
Please tell me.
You need more water, or did I don't know what you need.
I feel like they'd just be screaming at us, like in agony. Because we have to prune them. We have to cut their leaves. We have to repot them. So they'd be like, where am I? I'm so confused. I was comfortable in my home, right? Like, these poor plants, they're probably traumatized.
Oh, so good. So good.
I also really like the flower line, though. That made me very happy that it was in it. And I also think it sets up her character to be kind of, first off, strong-willed, because usually people would just say, oh, thank you, even if they don't like that. And also to set up that she does have these like moments where she can't really control what she's saying. She is very reactive, and she has a lot going on under the surface that she obviously does not know how to process, because there was no such thing as mental health care back then, and women were just hysterical. They were very, very repressed. So I thought that was such a great way to set up her character in both 1992 or 1922 and in 2024.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was a great moment. It felt like such a little nod to like all of the people, especially that I've seen the 1922 version of like. Because if you've seen the 1922 version, you know that bit and you know that whole sequence. And so it felt like a great little nod to us. But also, it's a character moment for her, like you mentioned. Right afterwards, she's like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. Like, I don't know. I'm sorry. I thank you. I didn't know why I said that. Like, and she kind of like spirals a little bit and then pulls herself up out of it. And I thought that was really great because I think in the 1922 version, it's just like a, yay, they're dead. And then they move on. And I was like, it's kind of a funny little moment watching it now. But they used it well. So it was a little redemptive moment.
Ellen kind of just exists to be sacrificed in the 1922 version. She's just kind of there to be an object of affection and then die to save the men.
Okay, any other last big things that we want to mention before we wrap? Did we hit most of the big ones? Agreed, though, her performance, she commits. She really gives it her all.
So one question that I had was, in the 2024 version, there's a lot of shots on Orlok's hands, and that's an obvious homage to the 1922 film. But I kept watching and wondering, like, if I didn't have that knowledge, how would I be reacting to this right now? Because it's a lot.
It's obsessive.
It got to the point where I was like, okay, we understand what you're doing. We can stop. And so I don't know, it felt a little over the top to me. So I just wanted to see if you guys had that same read or if that was fine for you.
It was fine for me at the time, but now that you bring it up, I'm like, yeah, we could have seen other things. Like, you could have shown his silhouette. You could, like, there are other things you could have shown other than his hands. Maybe they were just really, really proud of that manicure because it was white.
It was, yes, impressive.
So impressive.
Yeah.
I can't imagine how he gets anything done with those nails. And then you have to wonder, do his nails continue to grow after becoming a Nosferatu vampire demon thing of Belial? Like, did those keep growing even though he obviously has no hair, which, oh my God, can I just say, he was so nasty and I loved it. Like, his exposed skull, all of the like parts of him that were decaying, the penis that was decaying. I was like, because everybody was talking about that penis. They were like, there's full frontal male nudity. And I was like, this shouldn't be a big deal. And also, like, it was a prosthetic. Like, everybody, come on. Like, it's not that big of a deal. But as soon as I saw it all, I was like, this is magic. Thank you. Thank you for giving me this disgusting, goopy man. I love it so much. Like, there's a moment when he's feeding on her, and I love that he feeds on the chest too. I think that's such a cool, great subversion from what vampires usually do, which is just like a kiss on the neck. But she like fingers his back, and I was like, this is disgusting. Give me more. That makes me so uncomfortable. I loved it. I loved that. Ugh, maybe that's why I really liked the ending, because I was like, you were so nasty. I can't wait for you to bleed everywhere.
And they don't shy away from showing.
I really like body horror.
This movie was made for you. I loved the like nervous laughter when the ending credits started to roll in my theater of everyone just being like, haha, well, that was something. Just like collective, like, we don't know what to do with ourselves, so we must nervously laugh together because we need comfort.
Oh my God, I love that. Did you two have like pretty full theaters?
I went to the 9:50 showing. So my theater was, I would say, like 1/3, maybe a quarter full, which I was already impressed by, like 9:50 in like the suburbs of Pennsylvania here. Like I was like, wow, people are going to see this movie. I'm glad.
Love that.
How about you, Sarah?
Yeah, I went at 9:30 in the morning. So like there weren't that many people there, but there was probably like 7 other people in the theater, which is impressive for 9:30 in Dallas suburbs. So like I was shocked. I expected 1 to 2 other people, and that there was a lot more than I expected. So.
I love an early morning movie.
Oh, it's the best.
Full disclosure, I was supposed to see this on the 26th at noon. I was supposed to go with my husband, but I had a panic attack because I was costuming and I had to do 3 shows, and it was a lot. So I was like, I don't know what to do. And Neil was like, okay, we're supposed to go see Nosferatu. And I was like, I don't know if I can right now. I think I have to wait because I don't think I can process it. And he was like, all right, we'll switch the tickets. So then we switched the tickets to Sunday, and I brought my sister instead, and we went at 7:30 at night. And it was full. Like, there were a bunch of people in the audience, which was awesome. I was the only person who was cackling with glee. multiple times in the movie because when I went to go see The Substance in the cinema, I laughed the entire time because I was like, this is so uncomfortable. Absolutely give it to me. I'm going to laugh. So I was cackling. Nobody else was. But there was like there were collective gasps in the audience. Like we were all in it together, which was super fun. We did go see a movie on the 26th and it was terrible because Neil was like, why don't we just go see Sonic 3? Like that's an easy one. I was like, okay. And then we were like, we're embarrassed. We're embarrassed that we're in the cinema right now. Like, I can't believe we're watching this film. And everybody that told us it was good, you were wrong. You were very, very wrong. We heard from multiple people to go see it in the cinema. And we're like, okay, we like Sonic. Sounds great. Not the movies, but we like the characters. So sure. Yeah. Nosferatu, way better experience. Go see that.
Oh, yeah. Well, I'm glad the theater was packed. That's amazing. I've been seeing that the box office success of this movie so far has been incredible. I think like one of the highest on like a Christmas Day, holiday day release date.
And so for a rated R film.
People are going to see it. I'm so thrilled.
Give us more rated R films, please. We will show up.
Mm-hmm. We will. All right. Well, this was our review and discussion of 2024 Nosferatu. You can find it available out in theaters. And as we mentioned, you got to go see this in theater just for the visuals and the sound and audio design alone. Incredible.
Oh my God, yes.
Very much worth going. Thank you for listening to today's episode of Movies and Us. And a big thank you to you, Britt, our resident vampire expert and Robert Eggers super fan.
Thank you so much for having me. I absolutely adore coming on this podcast. I thank you for extending the invitation to talk about something you did not realize was so in my wheelhouse that I was just giddy to be here. Yeah, I really appreciate it. This has been a blast, even for 7 a.m. Since we're recording very early.
Thank you for sharing all of your thoughts and takes. And I'm so thrilled this landed with you, because there's nothing worse than something you love, and then they just kind of, you're like, that didn't land. But this sounded like this slam dunk home run.
It was a slam dunk for me. Like, I will buy this movie when it's released. I will. It's probably going to be one of those things. It's like a comfort watch where I just put it on. I'm like, I'm just going to watch some really decaying bodies today. Perfect. I'll be cooking and my husband will come home and be like, why are you watching Nosferatu right now? And I'm like, just because it's comfort. Fast forward through Harding, though.
Needed a little pick-me-up. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Well, Britt, where can people find more of you, your thoughts, your commentary, connect with you on the interwebs?
Oh, absolutely. So on Instagram and Twitter and Blue Sky and TikTok, you can find my podcast 1001 by 1 usually just at 1001 by 1 or 1001 by 1 podcast. You can find me specifically on Letterboxd, Instagram, and Blue Sky at Britsby Hobnob. I know it's a weird one, but my sister gave it to me and I love it. It has a rich history and I love talking movies. I especially horror. So please come check us out. We're coming up to the end of our season at 1001 by 1. So we are having our next couple episodes are a Russian folk horror called V, which is fascinating. So perfect timing. Then we have Jacob's Ladder. And then we're rounding out the season with a Wong Kar-wai ranking, which was our longest episode to date. I believe it's 3.5 hours. And then our season roundup.
Love it. We will include all of those handles and links in the show notes. So y'all check her out. Go follow her. I will make it easy for you to find as well.
And we got to get you both on the podcast next season. So we should chat about that. Let's see what we can cook up. I'd love it if you came and joined me.
Love it. We'd love to do that. That'd be fun. All right. Well, our name, Movies and Us, sums it up. We're all about movies and the powerful ways we can connect with each other and the world around us. This podcast is about all of us and our shared stories, so everyone is welcome here, and we're so glad you spent time with us today. You can subscribe to this podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you tune to your favorite shows. Drop us a rating and review, letting us know your thoughts about 2024 Nosferatu. How did it land with y'all? Did you like it? What did you think about Orlok and the decaying bodies? You can connect with us on Instagram, Threads, and TikTok at MoviesandUsPod, or email us at moviesandUsPod@gmail.com. We will be back next week with one of my favorite episodes that we usually do every year, a little tradition of ours, where we rank our top 10 films that we've watched in 2024, which will be really fun. All right. Well, we hope you have an amazing week, a great holiday season, and we'll see y'all next week.